Okay. So, hi. I think we have Ella coming in too. So, all right. So today we're going to talk about land, and I'm just going to go through the steps that I go through when I'm listing land. Okay. So if anybody has some comments or things that they do I can move over here, Janice, that they feel would add to this, please chime in. Okay. If you guys have done something different. So, okay. So the very first thing you have to do when you're buying land is you're going to have to walk the land. So you have to go to DSW and buy hunter boots. They're really nice, fashionable boots. Okay? First step. Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So first thing I do is I go and I meet with them. We talk about the land, um, what it's what they bought it for, what it's been used for. You know, it all depends on, like, I have. No, we're talking about listing land. Are we talking about listing land or buying land? Oh, sorry. Okay, I'll start with listing. Okay. So no, not necessarily. I will go walk it. So first thing I do is I go and I meet with the vendor and I talk about what the land is for. Did they buy it for, like the piece I have in Prospect? They bought it to have waterfront. And then, so it's important to understand what the waterfront was used for and why. For instance, it's oceanfront, but the reason they bought it is so shallow, and she's a diver, so she can walk out like 100 feet, and so you'd never get a boat in there. So make sure that, sit and have a good talk to them of why they're selling it. Other land I have out in Elmsdale, he has bought up pieces of land, and he's now subdividing them off. Okay. Um, and that brings us, and that's a critical part, because most times when a seller is selling land, there's no HST. So if he is subdividing one PID into, say, 4 pieces that he's selling off, the first piece that you sell is not subject to HST. Every piece you sell after that is subject to HST. Okay? So make sure that when you first talk to the person, you're saying, was this subdivided? Okay? So for instance, my guy out in Elmsdale, the 5-acre piece that I have that he plans on subdividing, when I actually sat down and talked to him and said, did you give anything away? Yes. I gave 5 acres to my son a few years ago. Boom, there's his first piece. Okay, so every piece now on Robin's 5-acre parcel is subject to HST that we sell. Across the road, he has another piece that he's subdividing. He hasn't done anything with it, never given any away. That one won't have HST on the first part, because on the first piece he sells. Right. Yeah, go right ahead, yeah.
If you have, say you owned a piece of land, lived on it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you subdivided it because it was so big. And then you sold your house, you sold your land that was, you sold a house that was on the land. Is that first piece subject to HST?
No, you have a house on it, so it's not subject to HST.
Well, okay, so here's a big piece of land, right? She subdivided it.
Right.
So now there's a separate piece of land, but she was living in the house on the first piece.
Right.
Sold the house. Oh, that's still that. So it's not subject to HST.
No, it shouldn't be, because she sold her home on the other one.
Right.
So I have one in Flanders Hills that is for sale there now. And then when you get into subdividing, of course, it's a whole new thing. So when you talk to anybody about that, first of all, go to HRM and make sure, call them with that PID and make sure it is subdividable, because a lot of people think just because it's a big piece, I can subdivide that off. Okay?
So who at HRM, is it the planning division?
I call planning.
Do you call planning?
Yeah. Yeah. They're brutal. It takes them 3 days to call you back.
Yes, and it takes you a few times to
Yeah.
get through to the proper.
Yeah.
So
Unless you got Kim Lewis on the phone, then she doesn't mess around. She just bang.
Kim Lewis.
Right, Kim?
Kim?
Yeah.
Exactly, that's right.
Okay, Kim,
Yeah, law.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, just a sec. I got to run, don't I, with the microphone. Just a sec. I'm sorry.
If you're living in the house on a subdividable piece of land and you continue to live in the house, you subdivide and sell the other piece, is that HST-able? But that's your first, okay.
Yeah, that's your first piece that you've subdivided. So it's not, sorry, Holly, what do you want me to get rid of?
I was just, get rid of that browse and private thing so that it can see it.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'll stand up if I've got to run. So now we're talking to our vendor. We
Still there's no sound.
still no sound. We need Aaron for that. I'm useless. Well, I'm not totally useless, but I'm useless with the computer. It's turned on now. I accomplished that.
Is she the only?
I can hear you. Lynn, is your volume? Oh, she can't hear me.
Shelley.
No, Shelley can hear me.
Oh, Shelley's saying.
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Yeah, Shelley's saying, oh, hey, Cheryl. Hey, no, it's okay. No, God, no. It's me. So we've met with our vendor. We know why he bought the land. We also know why he's selling. Okay. And so like with anything else, and we've talked about the HST. So what we're saying, Cheryl, just before you get here quickly is so, well, the first step is to go buy really awesome boots to walk the land in. Hunter, camel green. She can't hear me. I can't tell her.
Hi, Shelley.
Okay. So Cheryl, just to kind of, we could talk to them about what they bought it for. So I was giving an instance of, like I have oceanfront in Prospect. And I said, well, why did you buy it? What do you want to use it for? And she's a scuba diver. So she wanted a piece that for 100 feet out only went to your thighs. So that's really important because and that's one of the reasons I'm having so much trouble selling it, is because nobody else wants it. You can't launch a boat, right? So it's, that side of the road is 79,000. The opposite side of the road is 250,000 because they're on the bigger bay, but they're both on Noonan. One's on this side, one's on that side. It makes a big difference. And then we talked about whether or not there's HST on land. So out in Elmsdale, I have a 5-acre parcel that he's subdividing off of a large parcel. Okay. That all has HST on it because he's already given one parcel to his son a few years ago. Now across the road, I have another one that he's subdividing. There won't be HST on that one because this will be the first piece he sells. Subsequent, if we can get them sold, there'll be HST on the other ones. Okay. So now you've sat down with your client and talked to them about why they want to sell. Now we're going to go home and do our homework. So we're going to go on property online, like we always do, of course, and look for any easements or burdens or anything on the property. And then, of course, you want to look at your map, your property online map, kind of far out. And then what I do is I go to Google Earth and I look at the actual property. So I haven't walked it yet. I'm just doing my homework right now. And that gives you a really good view of, because, you're only going to walk if the 5-acre parcel, I didn't walk 5 acres. Most of my homework was done looking at that map, so I walked the first little bit.
So how would you know from Google Earth that it's like, does it have, property lines on Google Earth that you can tell that it's that big? So
No.
if you were walking it, wouldn't you have to have some kind of survey or markers or something to let you know how big it is actually?
Yeah, well, I've already gone on property online, so I know how big it is, and I've looked at the outline. Okay, so then I go on Google Earth, and like I had one last year was 100 acres on Kings Road. You can't walk 100 acres. Okay, so no, it had a huge wetland in the middle of it, huge wetland. And I wouldn't have seen that if I hadn't gone on Google Earth. That's how I saw the wetland, right? I also, when I'm on property online, I click all the parcels around it to see who owns it, okay? Because you never know. It may be Crown Corporation, it may be, for instance, if there was a big piece for sale in Cole Harbor, and I think it's off the market now, but the reason nobody would buy it, it would be great for development, but if you click all around it, it's Millbrook Reservation. So what happened a few years ago is when somebody did a development back, it was Whitestone on Sherwood and that street back in there, what happened is 10 years later, there was apartment buildings built in their backyard. So now they're all having trouble selling their properties because they literally have this apartment building right in their backyard. So look around to see who owns the land.
I was going to say viewpoint isn't always accurate, but they do have an outline of the lot sometimes on the satellite view.
Yeah.
So if you want to see like how close the house, like if you want to try to get a visual maybe of where the lot line is, you see there's a house or a barn or something, and then you go to the property, it's kind of helpful.
It is helpful. I hate viewpoint. Let's just put that on the record. But you're absolutely right. Viewpoint will give you that square. Now I a lot of times will use Bing.com for the maps to see the overhead instead of like our commercial guys, they use Bing, right? Yeah, and then sometimes I get a clearer view on Bing.com. Yeah, it's an aerial view. Yeah, that I get.
Because sometimes Google Earth is closer you get in, the blurrier it gets.
Mm-hmm. Especially if it's a parcel that's like further out of the city. Like I have 2 listed in Clam Bay and I have 2 more to list this week in Clam Bay and you can't get a Google Earth. What's that? Too much fog. That's Ella. Yeah. Yeah. So, and then of course you go back to good old Paragon and then you do your CMA like you would anything else. What did they pay for? What's land selling around it, you know.
And so
This, and I hate it when I'm home. So when you go on Paragon and there's only land in that area, like you've got a parcel of land where there's no other land around, where do you go for comparables? Like how far away do you go for comparables?
Well, I'll go back to, I'll look for like the 100 acres on Kings Road. That one there was hard because nobody has sold 100 acres on Kings Road forever, right? And I was selling what the guy that put Kings Road in like 30 or 40 years ago, I was selling a parcel for him. So the larger the piece of land you get, the value is subjective because the bank is not going to recognize anything over 10 acres on an appraisal. Okay, so what's the value? That's the first thing when you're trying to put a value on the land. You know, the other thing is, can you subdivide it? So on the 100 acres, if you call HRM and talk to planning or do, I mean, I always Google everything too. So the rules out there, most people think if you have 100 acres, you divide 2, 3, 4 acre lots as long as you have room for a septic and good water and stuff like that. But the rule on that side of Kings Road, one side is an acre. The rule on the other side of Kings Road is 25 acre parcels. So you only have 4 lots if you bought it. Okay. Yeah. You can call planning. Yeah, if you can't find anything online, but one of the things for me is when I looked at properties next to it, they're all 25 acres. They got houses on them, but they're all 25 acres. And you look across the road and they're all acre lots. So it kind of tells you that. Yeah. The other thing that this property had on it in Kings Road is he signed a 25-year lease for a cell tower. Right? And he did that before he was planning to sell the land. I could see the tower. Yeah. And there's a road up to it, right? Because they put it in. Yeah. The other thing that when you're looking at a big parcel like that, is you looking at Bing.com or Google Earth is that you can see if there's been any clear cutting around it. Okay, so in some areas, especially when you go further out in the country, you can look over on the hill and it looks beautiful, and then go just over the crest and somebody's clear cutted it. So no. Nope, for the woods. It could even be natural resources. You don't know. Could be Irving, could be reservation land that they've clear cut. Yeah. Doesn't happen too much, but when you get into like a 100-acre parcel, or the one out in Elmsdale that he has on the 50 acres, there's like, he had a mill. So he cut a lot of wood on his land, right? And they're not going to tell me. They're not going to say, oh, Brenda, I took all the wood off that land years ago. And they don't realize that when they're taking all that wood, like this guy has been there for 70 years. I mean, he's 88 years old. He still runs his sawmill, right? Yeah. So things he could have done to the property. Yeah. So now we've been on property online. We've looked at that. We've looked at Bing.com. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go and we're going to bring up the HRM map for zoning. Hi, Annette. Wow, I'm so excited. What a lot of people here today. Thank you. So go to does everybody know where to go on the HRM site for zoning? No? Okay. I'm not going to get online to do it now, but I will show you the link after the class. So when you go on the HRM site, accept the terms and go in, you'll go to they bring it, they'll ask you a search, and it's in the right-hand corner. You put the civic address in and you hit search. That will come up. The map will come up. Go over and click your boxes that say planning, put a tick in the box that says planning, and boom, all the zoning will pop up. Okay? And then what you do is, again, you call HRM, or you call whatever county you're in, just to make sure that there's no changes to the zoning. So what I did is normally I'll go to the land use bylaws just to make sure that I know, because sometimes it'll be multi-use or, you know, R1, or not R1, but commercial, and that's dealt with some of those before. So go to your land use bylaw, which again, you can find for the county. So for instance, the one in Hants County that I just did, I went in and looked at the land use bylaw. Then I called, they're changing all their land use bylaws. So what that land is that I have listed, what it's zoned now, it's not going to be zoned that in 6 months. So there's lots of homework to do when you're listing it.
Do you know offhand if they bought it while the zone, sorry.
Do you know offhand if they bought it while it was zoned, say, I don't know, R1, and they bought it, and then 6 months later it got changed, they can still use it as R1 with the grandfather? They cannot?
No. So if you have, for instance, there was 3 acres in Eastern Passage I sold a couple years ago. That, when Dartmouth and Halifax were separate cities, that was all R2. Okay? So what happened was, because everyone in the passage was selling off their front lawn, because it was R2, and all the fishermen are selling their front lawn to people, and they're sticking duplexes on it, or semis on it, everywhere. I mean, that's why in the passage you see them. They're just, it's like Timberley, or, you know, but the passage is really bad for it. So what they did is, when they amalgamated, they arbitrarily took all that zoning away, right? So when we went to sell McComb's land on Shore Road, the 3 acres, we knew that we could get 10 semi-detached lots. It took almost 2 years to get a development agreement. And he owned it. And he owned it when it changed zoning. Yeah. And he had no choice. You can't say no when they change the zoning.
I was just thinking about how when you have
When you're selling a house, say, and it was, you know, R1 a long time ago, or R2, sorry, a long time ago, and then the zoning changed, sometimes it's grandfathered and it's non-conforming, right? So that doesn't apply to land.
The only time that would apply, and you could check with a lawyer, but this is what I know, and Anne may know different, or Annette, unless you have a letter of non-conforming use. So the one that's coming up for me in Dartmouth next week, it is, when you look at the zoning, it's R1. And she had said to me, she said, no, this was a legal apartment when my mom and dad did it back in the 60s. I said, go get me a letter. And she did. So we now have a letter in the file. Yeah.
They're not dealt with that.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if it's the same kind
Yeah. You would have to. Ooh, I like your boots.
Thank you. Holly, I think the difference would be is, I mean, the house is built, so if it's an apartment building, it's already built, they can't very well make you tear it down. Land is raw.
And just to go back how bad Halifax can be, to use the apartment building for an example, there was an apartment building on Roby Street that was built in 1964 with 6 units. 1964. 6 units. And 7 years ago, the city said, oh, wait a minute. That's not zoned for 6 units. That's only zoned for 4. And guess what? When you took the permit out, you said you were only going to build 4, but you built 6. Change it. Change it. So the gentleman that thought he bought 6 units, not my buyer, that bought 6 units, had to change it to 4.
So when you said it can take up to 2 years, so say you have a buyer and they want you to put into the purchase and sale agreement that, you know, all permits, et cetera, will be received by such and such a day. Is there kind of a preliminary, anything preliminary that you can get from the HRM that says, like, more than likely this will be approved?
No, you can't. Because you're not applying for a permit. What you're doing is you're writing a development agreement. I'm not going to write a development agreement. I mean, that cost Mr. McCombs $8,000 to do what he did. I'm not spending that. That's up to them, right? I helped him, and I put him in with Daryl Jodry, and I went to meetings with him just because he's older and didn't really know. And Daryl was great. Like, he let us do the minimum that we had to do, but we did have to go to an engineering firm. They came and did a survey. They had to draw out the lots. Wastewater was a huge issue in the passage. And at the end of the day, we only got the development agreement for semis for 5. So we had 10 singles. Now we got 5 singles. Well, we didn't have any. I sold it, but and we have 5 semis. So no, the city will not. No.
Your buyer just needs to be prepared to do that and understand the market well enough to go ahead and purchase the property with all the permits.
Most buyers won't. And if you're going to protect your buyer, you would never allow them to do that. And that was one of the reasons we had to do all the work to get that development agreement, because there wasn't a buyer out there that would touch that land without it, right? And the other thing that you have to, and this is huge with, and I'm sure, Annette, you've run into it because you and Jerry have sold large parcels that you can develop. So I go and I sit down with somebody and they say, oh, I want $500,000. Because I always say to people, what do you think your property's worth? What do you think your land's worth? Well, I want $500,000. Oh, what do you want $500,000 for? Piece on Calway Road. And they said to me, well, you can turn this into apartment buildings. You can put roads in and you can do that and you can do this. And I said, yep. And once you put all the roads in and you put the infrastructure in and you get it all done, it's worth $500,000 to a buyer. Right now, it's worth about $65,000. It's raw. There's nothing there. There's nothing. Right. Right. They don't understand the buyer. If you do a municipal road, it's $1 million a kilometer. If you turn it into condominiumized land, it's $300,000 a kilometer. So the seller's not going to pay that, right? So the value's not there. By the way, I didn't list that piece. Yeah. Chris Peters listed it for 3 years and it never sold.
Did they put it up for 500,000?
Yeah.
Oh, really? And
Yeah. Chris Peters listed it. No. And the parcel behind it that Provident had bought, they paid $65,000 for it. Right? Raw land. So your sellers really don't understand, right. So, and the important thing for walking what you can of the land is there's one out, and you know it, Annette, it's on Bay Rent that I have out in Fall River. And he said, oh, Brenda, it's a beautiful view of the lake. You can get at it from Bay Rent, and you can get at it from the main road. You sure can. From Bay Rent, you can tumble down, and from the main road, you can climb up, right? So there's not a whole lot of lake view. He paid about $20,000 more than what he can get for it now, because the land is not, the value is not there, right? So land is, there are some pieces of land, the one I have in Prospect is now listed lower than what they paid for it. So the land is being affected. I find, don't you, Annette? Yeah, it's being affected as much as that is. Yeah. Oh.
Municipality approvals. That's where the problem lies. There's so much time, like Brenda said, to get any kind of approvals in, and you have to go through so many loopholes. And you need to know who you're talking to get anywhere. And it's just a real, people get fed up and they just say, forget it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once you get to know somebody there, if you build a relationship with somebody, you know, you can get, you know, at least you've got somebody to talk to. But Halifax for development agreements is the second worst in Canada, only to Calgary, right? Like Moncton, you can write and introduce and get approval on a development agreement in 6 to 10 months. And trying to, you know, getting something together, it takes about 6 months because you've got the engineers in and this and you get, you know, so from the time we get all that done, we could be 2 years. So Halifax operates in the cover your ass mode. They really do. So going back to this apartment building, just to tell you, can I go on a tangent here? Just to tell you how bad HRM is. So I sell this building to Yarif, and we call the city, and they're like, you know, like he bought it knowing it was only 4 units, but that there's a possibility maybe we can change it to 6. He can't get it done. They say, no, not zoned for that. Now around the corner, the same Jennifer Watts, they're taking an old commercial building and giving it to one of the developers. Sure, turn it into 30 units. We don't care. And yet this poor man that just wants 2 extra units open back up in his building, they won't do it. HRM is brutal, absolutely brutal. And the only person I haven't gone to yet is Mike Savage. I've been through all the other layers. So, okay, good. Tammy said Kings County's worse than that. So now you've done all your homework, and the new thing with land is the PDS, which we never had before. So there is a PDS for land. Yeah. So sit down with them and make sure they, yeah. My older fella there out there, and he's so cute. I said, is that a floodplain? Well, you know, at times. I said, oh no, it either is or it isn't. Not just at times. Yeah. Or someone will say to me, oh my God, Brenda, look at that beautiful pond. That's a mosquito breeding ground, right? To me, I look at that land, I say, I don't, you know, and so they're trying to upsell. So is there any questions on listing land? No?
So this is all buying.
This is listing.
This is if you're listing.
Oh, this is the listing, right? Yeah.
Well, I've got all kinds of questions probably.
You can ask me.
Well, no, we've got a development happening that's right at this close to, you know, all the engineers have been in and all that kind of stuff, right? And it's my question is so if you're a good buyer's agent, well, which of course we know you would be, what would you be requesting from me?
If you say you have all the engineers agree,
All that, the survey, the whole.
right. If you have final municipal subdivided lots, I'll get one from my buyer. If you don't, I'm not going to. You can have all your permits, you can have all your engineer drawings. You can be 2 years before you get an actual serviceable lot in there. You know, I mean, we have on Lake Loon, or Loonview Terrace, it's called, out in Main Street. We've been 9 months. The road's not in yet. you know, they're allowing us to build one building. They will allow you to build on one PID. Yeah, one big PID. So that's what developers will do. They'll build one house. Where's this one at, Holly?
It's in Brookside.
Brookside?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So it's not going to be, the developers are not going to be building anything. They're
No.
selling the
But
lots.
they're putting the roads in.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are the roads paved yet?
No,
Are they in? Did they
No.
cut the roads?
no.
You're a long way away.
Yeah, so it's like, they're this close to doing that. So it's been like 3 years of doing everything, right? So like, we've got the people to cut the roads, to do the roads, and they're going to be working on that very shortly. So they had to, get the surveying all done and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, my question is, so once the road is in and you've got all the permits and all of that, then is it like, okay, you buy that now?
you know what? Once they have, I would say that the road's into the point that this is all going to be well and sewer, right? Yeah, well and septic. Right, okay. And the reason I ask is there's a difference because when you're talking about HRM, you at times have to put down a $350,000 water bond. So what they'll do is and a lot of people don't have that much. It might even be up now and then. It was 350,000. Yeah. And the reason it's HRM, it's a water bond. And what they do is because HRM is going to go in and they're going to put some systems in and the developer's still going to be in there with excavators and dump trucks and all this stuff. Loonview, they had to do that. Okay, so what they do is they build the road up to a certain point that the engineers tell, and then they use it and they start building the building. So the road that is out there now this high will be as high as the ceiling when they're done. So now they're putting the water, so now they've built the base of the road, and now they're putting all the water systems in. And then they're going to fill in on top of that. So the road's going to go from here to here. Municipal.
Oh, okay.
So you're not going to have to deal with that. Right. Yeah. So you're still a long way out from the time that they started the first road out in Nature's Ridge till they got their permit. They were 18 months, almost 2 years. Yeah. Yeah. And they're turning it over to HRM? Okay. Well, they either are or they're condominiumizing it. They only have two choices.
Yeah, that's right. It is going to be.
Yeah. You have to pave them now,
Oh, yeah.
no matter where you're at. But you didn't have to do that years ago. Yeah. Years ago, big piece of land, cut your road through, gravel, get your permits, sell your lots. And they did away with that because of all the betterment charges, right? Because of all the taxes we pay when they pave our roads, we got to pay. So, yeah.
For the developer to have to give some parkland.
Oh,
Yeah.
You know what? We didn't have to on McCombs, and that was 3 acres. So I would probably say Annette, well, I know over 3 acres, and I know Victor had to do it on a 5 acre parcel. So let's say 5 acres.
I think it's 5.
Right.
Usually, and we did too. Land, that's not gonna-
It's kind of,
give up, but.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Or non.
Yeah. So your client really wants a piece in this subdivision? Brookside?
It's my family's subdivision.
Oh, okay, you guys are putting it in?
Yes.
Okay, great. Wow, good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a big undertaking.
Yeah, I know.
That's $1 million undertaking.
Oh, it's been on the go for a number of years and we're this close.
Yeah. So if I were you, I would put out pre-selling.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I'm going to do.
I would pre-sell.
But I just didn't know exactly.
And you pre-sell, is it like a letter of intent, or you just pre-sell until the roads go in? That kind of thing, right? So that's a lot of unknowns that I don't know.
You can do a letter of intent, and when you do your,
Their lawyer will do.
yeah, let the lawyer do that, or we do it all, you pre-sell condominiums, same thing,
Right. Exactly.
right? So we do a purchase and sale agreement, and they have agreement if you're not to a certain point, by a certain date,
Right.
then they can get out and they can get their deposit back.
Right.
Yeah, with it. Yeah, so.
That's where we're at right now.
Yeah. Now, the other thing that you have to think of is right now you've got one big parcel and your taxes are maybe $1,000 a year. Say they're $1,000 a year. That's all it's costing you. Plus putting your roads
Oh,
in
yeah,
and
well,
stuff.
they're all subdivided now. They're all
Okay.
PID'd out.
Okay, so your taxes will jump. No, they will. They will now tax you on each lot, right? So one of my gentlemen down in Cal Bay, his tax bill went from $1,000 a year to $22,000 a year. So as you're selling those lots, you're carrying that cost, right? Yeah. And he did it at a time when you didn't have to pave the roads. So it makes a big difference. Yeah, so it is like kudos to you guys. It's a big, big undertaking. Yeah, yeah. So that's why a lot of people now are condominiumizing their land, Holly. It's, you don't have to turn it over to HRM. It's $300,000 a kilometer as opposed to $1 million. That's why Seven Lakes is condominiumized, Cottage Country is condominiumized. Oh,
A central sewer system or septic system that they look after? Not, you can do
Not-
it either way.
yeah, Cottage Country originally didn't. Seven Lakes does. I don't know if it's a rule now.
I remember going to a thing with Pat Cassidy, and he was talking about the condominiumizing, and I thought what you're thinking is that they needed to have one major sewage, water, and it all went out like that, and I don't think that's what my family wanted to do, but I don't know.
Check with Pat. At one point, you could put 2 houses on one septic down in Cottage Country. I think is what they did, 1 on 2. I think it was, they shared a well and they shared a septic, I think.
24, 25 lots, 12 or 13 lakefront, and the others not. So I don't know if that would be feasible. People interested in condominiumized. Does that just mean the land is, I don't understand that.
Oh, well, that's just, we can talk about,
Then you have to have a condominium corp.
yeah. Yeah. So that's when you'd sit and talk to Pat and say, which is the best way to go. If you're, how long's your road? Like a kilometer or 2?
Just about.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it's that. Yeah, I guess it would be a kilometer.
So what's your final, you have all your final cost when it, everybody's up? Yeah, it's scary, isn't it? Yeah, yeah. So just so if you guys are wondering, my brother-in-law started developing land about 25 years ago. So I've always kind of watched him and been involved and stuff.
Is there a difference between homeowners associations and condominiumizing, or is it just the same term, same thing, 2 different terms?
In the States, they call it homeowners association. But in the States, you own your own land and it's a gated community, like say down in Florida. So you own everything, your whole lot, and you have to do all your own maintenance and pay for everything yourself. Up here, it's an actual condominium. So, you know, it's like Fisherman's Cove, you know, and you, or Seven Lakes. You own your little parcel of land, you got to mow it, and you got to clear your snow and do everything. But if you go in another one as like Fisherman's Cove, they even do your steps. So it all depends on how much you want to do. So yeah, so then basically you would just, like I said, do your homework on your numbers. Sometimes you're not quite sure. Like I said, the one on Kings Road was a really, really tough one to price, right? So we,
It's hard to actually price it. There's nothing like it there.
well, no, but you have other developments that I would look at and say,
How far do you go for that? How far do you go?
just go in other, what you call the rural bedroom communities. You know, so
Would you look at what those rural bedroom communities have for amenities? Yeah. So,
And how close are they?
right,
to
exactly.
Halifax? And how
Yes.
more desirable is the area,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
More people want to come from Brookfield to Halifax? than they do
Brookside.
from Porter's Lake to Halifax?
Right.
Probably. Because people tend to like the west side of Halifax better, right?
Yeah,
Porter's Lake.
right.
Haha, Ann just bought there.
So now I'm getting, now I'm listening.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those.
So have you sat down with an appraiser?
Oh, that's all that's been.
Good. Okay, so you're good. Okay. So that's list,
Sort of good.
okay. You got a big project. So yes, okay, so that's listing land. So basically then you're going to, and it's the same as anything, you're going to talk to my little 88, 89-year-old thought his land was worth 3 times what it's actually worth. But it's just like a house that way. So is there any questions on listing? No? Okay. So now we'll jump into buying. But Mama's had a coffee. I actually have a water here. Just let me go get a water. Hey, Derwin. Where's my water at? I made an offer on a house, I just had to show it. Oh, really? Yeah. 3 times.
Is he the one writing or?
Nope.
Star?
He's my lucky turn. Yeah. This happened again the other day. Yeah. Yeah. So that's what he said to me. He said, either I have really bad luck or I'm your lucky charm. You're my lucky charm. But he's selling his clients something more expensive, so. There you go. And I had an offer, so we're good, yeah. I'm just waiting for Mike and Tammy to come back, if you guys are wondering.
So this says I need to boots for what?
Hunter boots are in camo green now. Yeah, they're in camo green now, you know, the Hunter rubber boots. Yeah, I was in, yeah, right to it. I never liked ATV until I got these boots. All about the boots. No, I did. We're just on a little break, guys, just for them to get coffee and that. Whew, it's warm in here. Is it just me or is it warm in here? Must be me. I never know if I'm warm or I'm having a hot flash.
So I'll just ask you a question while we're breaking. So while you're looking at, you know, other parcels around the one that you're listing, I'm not talking about my land, and you see that it's crown land and that kind of stuff, would that be a good thing because probably no future development there, or?
Yeah, it depends.
Yeah.
Yeah. Normally, if it's crown land, I would consider that a good thing
Yes.
because you know that you're not going to get neighbors. I mean, if you're buying like that one on Kings Road, if you're buying 100 acres, you're not going to have neighbors anyways. But, you know, 25 acres, yeah. Yeah. But, you know, if it's a corporation, then you want to really find out they're probably going to clear cut it or do something. That happened.
Like, I don't know if you're familiar with the big parcel that just came on the Northwest Arm. So I had clients that were selling on Purcell's Cove Road, and right behind it was this huge big development, or you know, huge big parcel came up for future development. So it's freaking everybody out on the road.
Well, it shouldn't freak them out because everybody that's building over there, that's the hot spot.
I know,
Yeah.
exactly. It's going to be beautiful houses probably.
It's going to bring their value up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, that's exactly what I said.
Yeah.
They're just thinking there's going to be somebody in their backyard, whereas before there was nothing.
They were used to it, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You know, what I would say to them is, you know, you could have an apartment built in an Indian reservation behind you. Like literally.
Yeah.
Because that's what they're doing now. Or even like in Cole Harbor, like there's people that live on Cobble Road and right beside them is this huge General Dynamics building now. Because the reservation is allowed to sell their land for almost nothing. And at the same time, they were developing some of their land. Victor was developing some where my house was for 25 years. And what he had to go through, as opposed to what they had to go through, was scary. Scary. Yeah. Yeah. So to me, I would look at that as I would turn those lemons into lemonade. Yeah, no question. Yeah.
And it's been up in sale a very long time, so obviously.
You talking about the one David Dunn has on the Northwest Arm? Oh. Yeah. Oh, I don't have it. So it's the only thing that matters. It's all about Brenda, right? Okay, so now we're going to talk about buying land. Yeah. So buying, of course, you're going to kind of do the opposite. You know, you're going to
Still gonna probably do a lot of this.
You're going to do the homework. You're going to do the homework for them, but you're going to now say to the listing agent, send me all the information you have. Some listing agents have nothing, absolutely nothing, because they don't do their homework. So if it's a piece that first thing I say to my buyer is, what do you want to buy it for? So remember Pamela Franco? Pamela that I wrote
Oh, yes.
Lake Echo. Okay, so the first question is, Pamela, what do you want to do here? Well, I want to buy it. And first of all, you cannot mortgage land. If anyone doesn't know that, you cannot mortgage land. Okay? Can't mortgage land. That means you can't get a mortgage on just land, on bare land. Okay? So first thing is, ask your buyer, do you have a line of, I get people all the time that say, oh, I want to buy a piece of land and I say to them, do you have enough in an RSP to pull out and pay for the land? Or do you have a line of credit to pay for the land? And they look at me like, no, I'm going to go to the bank. Well, that's not going to work because the bank won't give it to you. No. They won't mortgage it. Only if your debt ratio is good. Right. Yeah. You'd have a line of credit.
You're going to build on it. Can't you do a bridge mortgage? Like a line of credit that you can roll then into the mortgage?
Most times not. When we built, we had to have our land paid for. We had to have that in the equity before they approved our mortgage to build. We did. Did you? Did you do turnkey? Okay, Ann might know better.
Well, I was just going to say one thing. I know you can do, if you're interested in a piece of land, you're working with a builder, you can get the builder to buy the land and then do a turnkey mortgage and do it that way. And that way that's the only way to mortgage, is that if you're actually going to build pretty much right away. You can't mortgage it and sit on it for 2 years.
Like for instance, like I said, if you have a builder that's gonna do a turnkey for you, they'll buy the land. Now here's the other thing that you have to make sure, that if somebody buys the land and they pay for it. So I had somebody call me that wanted one of my builders to build on the land they owned. They bought the land first to save the deed transfer tax. Well, we said we would do it, but on their mortgage draws with a $50,000 deposit. That's the only way he would touch it, because you're now building on somebody else's land, right? So they take. Now, one out in Porter's Lake, it was quite a house, and the builder took $85,000 deposit. And as soon as that portion was used, more money came, and the next part was built. The builder would not put any of their own money out for it. All right? So usually your draws run like roof tight, and then I can't remember the rest of them. But it's a long time from your piece of land, getting your machine in, getting it cleared, getting your foundation, getting it roof. That's a big job, and it takes a long time. And a builder's not going to put that money out of their pocket. So if anybody has clients that say, oh, I'm going to buy my piece of land and have a builder build on it so that I only pay deed transfer tax on the land, which is why our fella out in Porter's Lake did it. And then he had to put down $85,000 before the builder would even put an excavator on the property. And he was building like $600,000 home. But the builder wouldn't put any money out of their own pocket.
So
Yeah.
is that a normal course of business when somebody buys a piece of land and they want a builder to build on it? Is that, okay.
Yeah, because you're building on their land, right? Right? So they actually can restrict you. They can tell you to get off. It's like when somebody builds a garage in your yard, or, they want at least 50% down, right? Because once they build the garage, I know a guy that had a garage company, and he learned the hard way, because he took like, a $2,500 deposit, and then he built the garage, and then Buddy didn't pay him, and he kept him off the land. It's his land, right? Yeah. Yeah, so the builders won't touch it with, so make sure that your clients know that. Number one, you can't mortgage land. And number two, if you're buying the land first to save the deed transfer tax on your house, then a builder won't touch you. And if you have clients that say, well, I think I want to be my own general contractor and build my own house, like, don't, like, your advice as their agent, if you're in a fiduciary relationship, and I don't know, Ann, if you'd agree with it, but I tell people don't do that. No, because number one, you're going to get crappy subtrades, right? Because all the good ones are taken by the builders. Number two, you're going to pay through the nose for every trade you get because you're only a one of, right?
And we were just told by a mortgage broker last week that they won't even do mortgages in that unless there's a contractor.
Really? Oh, I didn't know that.
Now that might not be for all, but it is out there. So,
Oh, it must change. Is that RBC? Okay.
So say that, Tammy, sorry.
broker will not lend money to somebody not have a contract.
Oh,
But that was
I
for premier mortgages. I mean, that might be different for RBC. One's doing it, others are probably.
I've never heard of that, Tammy. Yeah.
First I heard it.
Because the bank wants your business, right?
Not always.
Yeah. I'm going to, you know what? I'm going to ask just so that,
But again, this was premier mortgage.
Yeah.
So RBC and Scotia,
Yeah.
the bigger banks might
Yeah.
not be that way, and this might be just starting.
you don't, your clients don't want to do that
No, they don't.
anyways. I mean, David's over there, a lady over in Timberley, she was her own contractor, sweetheart, very nice lady, and said maybe we should get somebody in. She had it built like 8 years ago, and the bill come to $66,000 to renovate all the boo-boos that she didn't know that they did to her house. And they have shown their ugly side in the first 7 years that she had it. A 2-foot bifold door on the ensuite. I know. I know. And she thought it was that cute. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not a good real estate.
No. She said to David, she goes, we should do something with the ensuite. And David said, we should gut it. Like, so it's, yeah. So you're just advise your clients, don't do that. The other thing is there's no warranties. They're not protected. Go turnkey if they're buying the land first, or if they want to, let the builder buy the land. Yeah. Very few people, the one I had on Kings Road that was on the lake, that one there, like, I could have sold that 50 times, but nobody had the money to pay me for it. The one I had of Robbins there a couple of years ago. Beautiful piece of land right on Kings Road. And we ended up having to drop the price a couple times only because we needed to get it to a price point where somebody could say, yeah, I've got a line of credit. I mean, how many people have a line of credit for $110,000, $120,000? Not too many people. Actually, the one that bought it's using it for a boat launch to her place on the island. Yeah, in the middle of the lake. Yeah. So find out the reason that they're buying it. And again, walk the land. You know, when Pamela, the one that I was talking about with Franco, when Pamela and I first went on that, because if they're going to build on it, and this one was by Weasel's Pizza thing in Lake Echo, between that and the church hall. So we, again, your boots, girls, walk it and feel it. And you know what we did? We waited till it rained and then we walked it, right?
So again, my question is, how do you know how to walk a piece of land that looks like, I don't know, a piece of land? You know what I mean? Like, how do you know? Right.
We looked, okay, so we were out in the road, looked for the markers. And then we kind of looked at the level of the land and said, where do you think you'd go in at, right? So if your land's going up like this, then maybe on this side of the land, it's just like this. So you just kind of look at it that way. And if you build a house, you're probably going to be maybe 100 feet back, 150 feet back. So what we did is the easiest way to access the land was by the fire hall there. So we tromped through the land and we found a brook through the land. That's huge because like there's one on Tanlower Court and that's the reason they can't sell it because there is a brook running right through the middle of it. Where are you going to build? Right? So you don't have to be, I mean, I know, you know what I mean? You just, if it's soggy, if it's marshy, you know, if you step down and your boot sinks to here, you're probably thinking this lot's going to have to be filled. You know, so that's all I do. I just walk it. So we found the brook. So then once we found the brook, we walked. We were out there for about an hour and a half, and we walked kind of along the brook, and then we stood back and said, well, how wide is that? So then we walked out the other side.
Was it you and your buyer?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Me and the buyer. Don't ever walk it by yourself and tell the buyer it's good to go. Yeah. No, no.
I just think about where you're going to, like, are you going to find the markers? Do you actually know?
Can't always find the markers, but this one here, we had a good idea because the community center was here and Weasel's Pizza was here. And this land sat right between it, right? So
Holly, just one other little piece of advice for you. If you have no sweet clue what you're doing when you go to walk land, is to invite your builder and or their excavator, whoever's going to do the development, to walk with you. That's what I'm saying. If you have a property that you're interested in, you could walk it initially with your client to see if they even like it, and then do a second walk with someone who's actually going to potentially lay out a foundation or look at that stuff, because you don't know, right? And sometimes they'll see something that you no matter how many times you've walked land, you don't see because you don't do it every day.
yeah. So if I was more to what Ann's saying, if I was to buy a piece down in Cal Bay, if I had a buyer that wanted one in Cal Bay, Eastern Passage, anywhere around there, or like the one on Flandrum, I have the house and we can subdivide. So I kind of walked through some of it, went about 50 feet back, and then I called Jerry Silvers because Jerry does septics, he knows the land, he's got the experience, that's what he's done all those years, okay? So Ann's right, just call somebody if you don't know. I mean, with the one on Lake Echo, it was fairly obvious. We knew there wasn't a really steep grade to get a driveway in. We weren't walking on piles of granite. You know, the brook was like to this side, you know, and it looked pretty good. Now, here's the thing. When you write your offer, you've got all those conditions there too, right? So you're going to protect your buyer. So when you've got a buyer buying land, don't leave it up to your buyer to do their own, like tell them they have to do it, but be on them and say, you have to go to HRM. You have to make this phone call. You have to talk to this person. So what I do, I don't know about you, Ann, but like with Pamela, we ended up not buying that land, but with Pamela, take your paper, go down to Alderney and sit with the person on the desk and say, I need answers. Alderney and Dartmouth is where you get, it's the planning department in Dartmouth, okay? Is there, can you get a driveway in there? Will they give you a permit for a driveway? Will they give you a permit for power? The other big thing when you're buying, get the seller to do the perk test. Okay, so that's really big. All right, so that's about a $500 cost. It's actually not in the agreement, so I add it. It's in the agreement that to make sure you can get a permit for an on-site sewage, but it doesn't tell you what kind.
So if it's a C1 or a C3 is going to be a lot more expensive, right? And it means the land is wetter. Is that correct?
Well, that would be, if you're really wet, you would go to like a peat moss, right, Ann? A C, normally, I could be wrong, but a C2 is a raised bed of 75 feet. Anything over 75 feet, right, Ann, with a pump, is a C3?
That's through the space on the land.
Right.
Grade and
The grade,
water flow,
exactly.
It's not a black answer.
Yeah.
Right, but when you get the people that know what they're doing to do the perk test, they tell you what.
She's trying to put the cost back on the seller.
We want the seller to do, you don't want your buyer to do the perk test? So when you're writing on a piece of land, there is no, like Franco saw me that night, I had an additional clause that said the seller will do the perk test, right? We want them to do that perk test. And I had written in that if we're not satisfied with it, and that's really important, because if you don't put that in, you've only asked them to determine what kind. You haven't said, I can terminate if I don't like it.
Sorry, but what is the perk test?
A perk test is when they go in, they take a soil sample, and then an engineer assesses that, or QP1 or QP2. I think it's the engineer, isn't it, Ann, that has to assess it. And what they do is they look at what the composite of the earth is made up of. And they say, is it going to be, like when we say C1, C2, C3, for instance, my house is a C1. So it comes out my house and I have a dip. So mine's a gravity fed bed. So that's the least expensive. And then a C2 is when you're, or C3, well C3 is uphill too, but say a C2 is when you look out in somebody's backyard and you kind of see the hump. Their backyard is flat. So what they're going to do is they're going to do layers of sand and gravel, and they put this black paper in, and yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, had the seller pay for the perk test. Yeah. And then to the but if remember whenever you're writing a clause, there's a what if. What if they don't do it? So if there's no what if in your clause isn't written right. Thank you, Anne. Oh, it's so good. Yeah. Yeah. But and again, check out the zoning for your buyer, find out what they want to buy. You know, what happened in Pamela's case too, at the end of the day, she decided, you know what, I don't want to take all my RSPs out and buy this land. She decided, let's just wait, I'll save a little bit more money. And I agreed with her on that because she could be 5 or 6 years out building. So that's the big thing when you're buying. And again, do your CMA, right? Your seller's going to tell you, I have 100 acres of land. You really don't care because only 10 acres have value in the bank size, right? Or when somebody says to me, well, Brenda, that's 4 acres. Well, I'm not going to use 4 acres. My house, you know, I have an acre plus. We only use not even 3/4 of it, right? You're not going to turn 4 acres into a lawn that you're going to mow or this and that. So again, it's subjective. Yeah, it's like once you have more than 3 bedrooms in the house, the value is subjective to the needs of the buyer, right? The same thing with land. So the size of the land is subjective. But anything over 10 acres, the bank's not going to appraise. They're not going to look at for value. Unless you're going to, yeah, Anne's right, sorry, yeah. Unless you're going to do a development. Right, yeah. And then you got such deep pockets, you don't care anyways. Right, Holly?
That's correct.
Yeah, and again, you know, really watch those conditions, work with your client, and sit down and make sure, don't just waive them, don't just let them go off and do their own thing and waive the conditions. They're really, really important, okay? There's 2 different land forms. There's one for urban and there's one for rural, okay? So because the urban one, it's the developer putting in the water and the sewage, right? But on the, and again, even when you buy land and the city has run all their services, you know, find out which side of the road the services are on because you're paying for that connection. So if your driveway's here and here's the water, bonus. If your driveway's here and here's the water line, yeah, yeah, if it's municipal. So does anyone have any questions on buying land? Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Anybody on joining us online have any questions? Kim, you've been so quiet. Is she still there? Oh, she's offline. Okay. Wow. So that's, unless you guys have any questions, that pretty much, Ann, did I miss anything?
I think we could do a second there. It might be interesting to actually do the forms with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
While I'm thinking about it. So if a piece of land is, the term that I've heard used down in Lunenburg County is landlocked, meaning somehow through the course of history, all the land around it that has any access to a road has been sold off. So you've got 10 acres. Then at that point, I guess, do you just contact the owners and try to get an easement, or you just say this land is...
I would advise my buyer that it's landlocked and you probably don't want to buy it unless you can actually get a legal easement, or you wouldn't get an easement, you get a right-of-way, right, Ann?
Let's say it's a seller that comes to me and says I have 20 acres, and then I discover, yeah, and there's no access to any road on it.
No value.
Just tell them.
No value until he gets a right-of-way. Unless somebody's got a helicopter going to fly in, but no, it's right. I would tell them there's no value. They can't get service. They can't do anything. Right. And Ann's right. If it's Lunenburg and they're going to use a well and septic, if he can get it right away, that's fine. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, the landlocked piece will have to get the right of way, and they'll have to pay somebody for that right of way. Nobody's just going to let them have you looked to see if there's a right of way?
This is just in theory, you know. I'm
Sometimes.
sure it'll come up at some point. It always does with me.
Sometimes there's right of ways you don't even realize. Okay. Yeah. Like my brother-in-law owns like a big chunk on a peninsula on the South Shore, and there's actually a right of way from 100 years that can go right, and it goes right up along Victor's land, right from one cove to the other cove that he's on. There's nothing he can do about it. He can't block it. Yeah. He put big tall trees so you don't see. People do use it. Yeah. And you even ATVs, anything, like he cannot, it's on his property and it's been there for 100 years. Yeah. Sorry.
No, I was just thinking.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say, Brenda, is it might be worth doing.
If I can entice you again, because you did such a great job. I'm so excited about the attendance.
I know.
My emails worked. To do a second stage where people can come back with questions from today and to actually, draft a listing and how to prepare a listing for a piece of land and how to actually write an offer. If you would be agreeable to do that with us, that would be awesome.
Okay. And with me, with a clause, I don't know about anybody else, but if I'm not quite sure on the clause, just make sure you have it in, and then just say to your client, I'm not quite sure what this means. That's how I learned. I would just say, I'm not quite sure. Let me, call in. Yeah. But, just make sure that all those the mean something, and it depends on the level of which they are at in the subdivision. Like, is the water and sewer in yet? Do you have final subdivision approval? Like, somebody selling, like when we were doing Riddy Road in the Passage, and Jerry said, I have final approval in 2 weeks. It took 6 months before we actually got something sold. So, because HRM is so fast at doing everything for you. So that's it. All good?
Yeah.
All good. Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you. I'm just happy to see people come to these.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really am.